The forecast said 3 days. That was Tuesday. It's now Friday night. The power has been out for 61 hours. The temperature inside your house has dropped to 48 degrees. Your phone is at 7% battery. The last text you got from your brother said the roads 2 counties over are still closed. And that was yesterday morning. Your kids are in sleeping bags on the living room floor. And you're standing in your kitchen, opening cabinets you already know are empty, running the same calculation you've been running since Wednesday afternoon. How much longer can we do this? That scenario isn't from a movie. It isn't a hypothetical designed to sell you something. It's a composite built from thousands of real accounts. From Texas in February 2021, from Louisiana in August 2005, from the Northeast in October 2012, from California in November 2018. Different states, different decades, different causes, same kitchen, same cabinet, same calculation. The people standing in those kitchens weren't reckless. They weren't stupid. They weren't the kind of people who ignored warnings or laughed at preparation. Most of them had simply never been given a clear, honest, realistic picture of what preparation actually looks like and what it actually costs to build it. Nobody told them the bar wasn't that high. Nobody told them that the difference between that kitchen and a completely different experience, calm, controlled, capable, was achievable in a single weekend for less than the cost of a dinner out. That's what this video is. Not a gear review, not a fantasy about grid-down scenarios and bug-out locations, not another piece of content designed to make you feel like you're already too far behind to start. A realistic picture of the threats that actually face American families in 2026, and a clear, layered, honest plan for building the kind of household that doesn't end up doing math in a cold kitchen at midnight. By the time this video ends, you'll have a framework, a sequence, a starting point that isn't overwhelming, because it isn't supposed to be. Only 5% of American households meet even the baseline 72-hour preparedness standard recommended by FEMA. That means 95% of the people around you, your neighbors, your co-workers, the families on your block, are one bad week away from that kitchen. You don't have to be one of them. Let's get into it. Let me ask you something. When you picture a survival situation, what do you see? Be honest. Most guys picture something cinematic. A mushroom cloud on the horizon, the grid going dark across the entire country, riots in the streets. Some kind of total collapse where the rules stop existing and only the prepared survive. And here's the thing, that image isn't random. You didn't come up with it on your own. That image was sold to you by movies, by TV shows, by YouTube channels that need extreme scenarios to get clicks, by an entire entertainment machine that profits from making you picture the end of civilization every time someone says the word survival. And that image, that cinematic apocalypse, is quietly destroying your ability to actually prepare. Here's why. When the bar for emergency worth preparing for is set at nuclear war or total societal collapse, nothing short of that feels worth acting on. A 3-day ice storm doesn't feel serious enough. A job loss that wipes out your cushion in 60 days? Not dramatic enough? A water main break that leaves your neighborhood dry for 48 hours? Please. That's a minor inconvenience. Not a survival situation, except it is. In February 2021, Winter Storm Uri hit Texas. Millions of people lost power. Water pipes burst across the state. Grocery store shelves emptied in hours. People burned furniture to stay warm. At least 246 people died. Not in a war zone, not in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. In their homes, in a modern American city, in the 21st century. No EMP, no foreign invasion, no societal collapse. Just a winter storm that lasted a week. That's the threat you should be preparing for, not the movie. The storm, the layoff, the flood, the 3-day blackout that hits when you have $47 in your account and nothing in your pantry. The realistic threat list looks nothing like Hollywood, and once you see it clearly, everything about how you prepare is going to change. So let's actually build that list. Not the fantasy list, the real one. The threats that have a documented history of hitting ordinary American families, not in dystopian fiction, but in the last 10 years, in places you've heard of, in situations that didn't make it into a Marvel movie but absolutely destroyed people's sense of security when they happened. Power outages lasting more than 48 hours, according to the US. Energy Information Administration, the average American experiences over 8 hours of power interruption per year, and that number has been climbing. Major outages affecting thousands of households happen dozens of times every single year across this country, not because of an attack, because of aging infrastructure, weather events, and a grid that was never designed for the load it carries today, job loss or sudden income disruption. The Bureau of Labor Statistics consistently shows that between 1.5 and 2 million Americans file new unemployment claims every single month in a normal economy. One medical emergency, one company restructuring, one bad quarter, and a family that was fine on Friday is in crisis by the following Wednesday. Short-term supply chain disruptions, you saw it in 2020, empty shelves. Not because of a war, because of a logistics bottleneck and a demand spike that the system wasn't built to absorb. Baby formula, medications, basic over-the-counter supplies, gone for weeks. Severe weather events, floods, hurricanes, ice storms, wildfires. FEMA's own data shows that the United States averages over a dozen major disaster declarations every single year. These aren't rare, they're scheduled chaos. They follow seasons, they follow geography, and they consistently catch unprepared families completely off guard. Medical emergencies with no financial buffer. A single ER visit without adequate coverage averages over $2,000 out of pocket. One broken arm, one allergic reaction, one kidney stone, and a family with no buffer isn't just dealing with pain, they're dealing with a financial crisis that compounds for months. This is the real threat list. No nukes, no zombies, no total collapse of Western civilization, just the ordinary machinery of modern life, grinding, stalling, and occasionally breaking down in ways that expose exactly how thin the margin really is for most households. And here's what's important. Every single one of these threats has a known response, a tested response, a response that doesn't require a bunker, a weapons cache, or a 5-figure investment. It requires a plan built around probability, not cinema. Now here's where most people make the first critical mistake. They hear everything I just said, the storm, the job loss, the supply chain gap, and they nod. They agree. They think, yeah, that makes sense, and then they do nothing. Not because they don't care, not because they're lazy, because the moment they try to start, the apocalypse image comes back, and suddenly, preparing for a 3-day blackout feels like it has to look like a fully stocked underground bunker with a year's worth of food, a water filtration system the size of a refrigerator, and a generator that could power a small hospital. That mental image, the all-or-nothing standard, is the single biggest reason people never start. Psychologists call it the perfection trap. When the mental model of success is set impossibly high, the brain reads any smaller action as inadequate. So instead of doing something small and useful, you do nothing at all. You wait until you can do it right. And that moment never comes. Here's what actually matters. FEMA's own baseline recommendation, the one they publish on their official website, the one they've stood behind for decades, is 72 hours, 3 days. That's the window they identify as the most critical gap between when a disaster hits and when organized external help arrives. 3 days of water, 3 days of food, a flashlight, a basic first aid kit, a way to get information without depending on cell service. That's the floor, not the ceiling. And that floor, the actual minimum that would have made a measurable difference for hundreds of thousands of families during Uri, during Katrina, during the 2003 Northeast blackout, during every major supply disruption of the last 2 decades, is achievable for most households in a single weekend for under $50. That's not a bunker. That's not paranoia. That's not a lifestyle overhaul. That's a Tuesday decision that changes what the next emergency looks like for your family. The realistic threat list doesn't demand an extreme response. It demands a proportionate one. And proportionate, in most cases, is a lot more accessible than the entertainment industry ever wanted you to believe. So now that you know what you're actually preparing for, let's start building the response, layer by layer. Starting with the one thing that costs nothing that you can act on today, and that will matter more in the first 72 hours than almost anything else you own: water. Not gear, not food, not a bug-out bag with a custom loadout. Water. It's not a dramatic answer. It doesn't sell well. Nobody makes a YouTube thumbnail out of a gallon jug sitting on a shelf. But if you strip away every piece of survivalist marketing, every gear review, every tactical discussion, and you ask the question, what is the single variable most responsible for death and serious harm in the first 72 hours of a domestic emergency? The answer, consistently across documented disasters, is dehydration and waterborne illness from compromised supply. Let that land for a second. Not violence, not exposure, not lack of weapons or tactical knowledge. Water. The human body begins making poor decisions at around 2% dehydration. Not dangerous decisions, just measurably worse ones. Slower processing, shorter temper, reduced problem-solving capacity. By 5%, you have headaches, significant fatigue, and impaired judgment. By 10%, you're looking at serious medical risk. And in a high-stress emergency scenario, where you're moving more, sleeping less, and operating under psychological pressure, that timeline accelerates faster than most people expect. Here's what makes this particularly dangerous in an urban or suburban context. Most people assume water disruption is a third world problem, or a wilderness problem. It isn't. In February 2021, over 12 million Texans lost access to safe running water during Winter Storm Uri. In 2016, Flint, Michigan had been dealing with a contaminated municipal water supply for nearly 2 years before it became national news, meaning hundreds of thousands of people were drinking compromised water while assuming it was safe. In 2023, Jackson, Mississippi experienced a water system failure that left the city's entire population without reliable safe water for weeks. These aren't outliers. They're data points in a pattern. Municipal water systems in the United States are aging. The American Society of Civil Engineers gave the country's drinking water infrastructure a C- in their most recent infrastructure report card. There are an estimated 240,000 water main breaks per year in the US alone. The system works until it doesn't, and when it doesn't, it fails fast and without much warning. The gap between water is fine and water is gone is often measured in hours. And the average American household has enough stored water to last approximately 1 day, if that. So what does the actual solution look like? Not the prepper fantasy version, the real version, the version that works for someone living in a 2-bedroom apartment in a mid-sized American city with a normal budget, a normal schedule, and zero interest in turning their home into a logistics depot. Here's the baseline number: 1 gallon per person per day. That's the FEMA standard. That's what the Red Cross recommends. That's what emergency management professionals across every major agency agree on as the functional minimum for drinking and basic sanitation. For a family of 4, a 72-hour supply means 12 gallons. That's 3 standard water jugs from any grocery store or big box retailer, the kind that cost between $1 and $2 each. 12 gallons, under $6. Fits under a bed or in a closet. That's your floor. Now here's where most people stop, and where they shouldn't, because stored water is a starting point, not a complete strategy. Containers degrade. Water can develop bacterial growth over time if stored improperly, and depending on the nature of the emergency, 12 gallons may not be enough if the disruption extends past 72 hours. So you build in a second layer, the ability to purify water from alternative sources. Unscented liquid chlorine bleach, standard household bleach, the kind that costs under $3 at any grocery store, can purify water at a ratio of 8 drops per gallon. That's it. 8 drops, stir, wait 30 minutes, drink. The CDC publishes this method. FEMA endorses it. It works on tap water that's been compromised, on collected rainwater, on water from a bathtub that you filled before the pressure dropped. A bottle of bleach sitting next to your water supply costs almost nothing and multiplies your options significantly. A third layer, for those who want to go one step further without a major investment, is a portable water filter. The Sawyer Squeeze retails for around $25 and filters up to 100,000 gallons over its lifetime. The Life Straw is under $20 and works directly inline as you drink. Either one turns a questionable water source into a viable one. 3 layers: stored water, purification chemicals, portable filter, total investment under $40. That's not a prepper setup. That's basic household infrastructure, the kind that should have been standard decades ago and isn't because nobody told you it needed to be. Your family drinks water every single day. Making sure that continues during an emergency isn't extreme, it's just responsible. Now let's talk about food. but not the way the prepper industry talks about food. Because if you've spent any time in survival spaces online, you already know the drill. Freeze-dried meals, bulk wheat berries, mountain house buckets, MREs, a chest freezer full of vacuum-sealed protein, a dedicated storage room with rotating inventory and a spreadsheet tracking expiration dates. And if that's your standard, if that's what food preparedness looks like in your head, then you've already talked yourself out of starting. Because that version requires money you may not have, space you definitely don't have, and a level of commitment that feels like a part-time job. So let's throw that image out entirely. The most effective food storage system for the average American household isn't exotic. It isn't expensive. It doesn't require a single trip to a specialty prepper retailer or an online order of anything you've never cooked before. It's called the deep pantry method. And the core principle is almost embarrassingly simple. Buy more of what you already eat. That's it. Next time you go to the grocery store, you buy 2 cans of beans instead of 1, 2 boxes of pasta instead of 1, 2 jars of peanut butter instead of 1. You don't change your diet. You don't learn new recipes. You don't stockpile anything your family won't actually consume. You just buy slightly more of the exact same things you're already buying, and you rotate through them naturally, oldest in front, newest in back. In 30 days of doing this consistently, you have a 1-week buffer. In 90 days, you have a month. No special equipment, no dedicated storage room, no expiration date spreadsheet. Just a slightly fuller version of the pantry you already have. Here's why this matters beyond the obvious emergency use case. A deep pantry insulates you from short-term supply disruptions, the kind that emptied shelves in 2020 and sent people into panic buying spirals. It insulates you from price spikes. If rice goes up 15% next month, the rice already on your shelf cost you last month's price. It reduces the number of grocery runs you need to make during bad weather, illness, or financial tight spots. It functions as a buffer against the ordinary friction of life, not just the dramatic emergencies. And it starts with the next item you are going to buy anyway. But here's the gap nobody talks about. You've got water, you've got a growing pantry, you've got rice, beans, pasta, canned goods stacked neatly on a shelf. And then the power goes out, and you realize, with a specific sinking feeling, that every single thing in that pantry requires a stove, an electric stove, the one that is currently as useful as a piece of furniture. This is one of the most common and most avoidable failures in household preparedness. People invest time and money building a food supply and zero time thinking about how they're actually going to cook it when the infrastructure they depend on disappears. It's like buying a car and never thinking about fuel. The supply is only as useful as your ability to access it. So let's fix that right now. The most practical solution for the average household, apartment dweller, suburban family, doesn't matter, is a portable butane stove, not a propane camp setup, not a wood-burning rocket stove, a simple compact butane canister stove of the kind used in professional catering kitchens and Asian restaurants across this country every single day. The stove itself runs between $15 and $25 at any Asian grocery store, restaurant supply shop, or on Amazon. The fuel canisters cost around $2 each and last approximately 1 to 2 hours of cooking time depending on the flame level. For a family cooking 1 hot meal per day during a 72-hour outage, 4 canisters is more than sufficient. Total investment, including stove, under $40. It works indoors with adequate ventilation. It's clean, it's controllable, and it runs on a fuel source that stores safely, doesn't degrade quickly, and is available almost everywhere. For those in apartments where any open flame creates concern, 2 alternatives worth knowing. Sterno canned heat, the same fuel used under buffet trays at every catering event you've ever attended, burns cleanly and can heat a small pot with a simple wire rack stand. And the thermal cooker method, bringing water to a full boil on any heat source, combining it with rice or oats in a sealed insulated container and waiting 60 to 90 minutes, produces a fully cooked meal with 0 additional fuel. 1 boil, 1 meal, no flame required after that. 5 meals, that's the target. Know how to cook 5 simple calorie-dense meals without touching your electric stove. Rice and beans, oatmeal, canned soup heated through, pasta with canned sauce. Peanut butter on crackers requires no cooking at all. 5 meals, 1 stove, under $40. The gap between having food and being able to eat it closes completely. The power has been out for 6 hours now. Your water is stored, your butane stove is ready, your pantry has 3 weeks of food, and you have absolutely no idea what is happening outside. That's the part people forget until they're living it. The physical needs, water, food, warmth, those feel urgent and obvious. But there's a second layer of need that hits almost as fast, and it's psychological. Information. Knowing what caused the outage, knowing how long it's expected to last, knowing whether you need to stay put or move, knowing if the situation is contained or expanding. Without that information, even a well-prepared household starts making bad decisions. And here's the problem with how most Americans expect to get that information in 2026. Their phone. Specifically, the apps on their phone, weather apps, news apps, social media feeds, emergency alert systems that depend on data connectivity, all of which require two things to function: a charged battery and a working cell network. In a localized outage, cell towers stay up, and for a while. They run on backup power, but in a major regional event, those towers get overwhelmed almost immediately. Thousands of people simultaneously trying to call, text, and stream information through the same infrastructure creates congestion that makes the network effectively useless. During Hurricane Sandy in 2012, cell service across large parts of New York and New Jersey was either completely down or so degraded it was non-functional for days. During Winter Storm Uri, the same pattern repeated across Texas. Your phone becomes a flashlight with a countdown timer. The solution is older than smartphones by about 70 years, costs less than $20, and works when every digital system around you has failed. A battery-powered or hand-crank AM/FM radio with no AA weather band capability. NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, operates a network of radio stations that broadcast continuous weather and emergency information 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, across the entire United States. During any declared emergency, those stations carry real-time updates from local and federal emergency management, road closures, shelter locations, boil water advisories, evacuation orders, return-to-home clearances, all of it, continuously, on a signal that doesn't require the internet, doesn't require cell service, and doesn't go down when the grid does. A radio like the Midland ER310 or the Kaito KA500 runs between $20 and $40. Both include hand-crank charging, solar panels, and a built-in flashlight. One device solves two problems simultaneously, light and information, for the cost of a dinner out. Knowing what is happening is not a luxury in an emergency, it is a tactical advantage. The household that knows the outage is expected to last 18 more hours makes completely different decisions than the household sitting in the dark assuming the worst indefinitely. Information is preparedness. An analog information infrastructure is the most resilient kind you can own. Let's talk about something that almost never appears in survival content. Not because it isn't critical, because it's uncomfortable. Money. Specifically, the absence of physical cash in a crisis, and how that single gap can make every other preparation you've done completely irrelevant at exactly the wrong moment. Here's the scenario. The power has been out for 18 hours. Your neighborhood is fine. No structural damage, no flooding, no evacuation order. The outage is regional, crews are working on it, but the timeline is unclear and you need to make a run for a few things. Extra batteries, a bag of ice to preserve the food in your fridge, maybe a hot meal from the one gas station 3 miles away that's running on a generator. You get there. The shelves are picked over but not empty. There are things you need. You reach for your card. The reader is down, not the store. The payment infrastructure. The point-of-sale systems that process every debit and credit transaction in this country run on the same networked infrastructure as everything else. When power is disrupted at scale, those systems fail. Some stores have offline processing capability, most don't. And even the ones that do have limits on what they can authorize without a live connection. Cash only. This happened in Texas during Uri. It happened during Sandy. It happened during the 2003 Northeast blackout. It happens, with documented regularity, in every major power disruption in modern American history. It is not a hypothetical. It is a pattern. And the average American household has less than $30 in physical cash at home on any given day, if that. Because why would you? Everything runs on cards. on tap to pay, on Venmo and Zelle and digital wallets that live on a phone that's now at 14% battery. The fix is straightforward and requires no financial sophistication whatsoever. Keep a minimum of $100 in small bills, 1s, 5s, 10s and 20s, in a designated spot at home. Not in your wallet, not in your car. At home, in a fixed location that every adult in your household knows about and can access independently. Why small bills specifically? Because in a cash-only crisis scenario, most vendors won't have change. A 20 is useful. A $100 bill in a situation where the register can't open electronically is a problem. Small denominations give you flexibility and avoid the friction of needing change from a seller who's already operating under stress. $100 in small bills. Static. Untouched unless there's a genuine emergency, replenished immediately after use. That's it. It costs nothing beyond the cash itself, takes up less space than a paperback book, and in a regional outage scenario, it is the difference between being able to acquire what your family needs and standing in a parking lot with a useless piece of plastic in your hand. Here's something the prepper industry will never sell you, because you can't put it in a cart, you can't add it to a wish list. There's no affiliate link for it and no unboxing video that makes it look cool. It's the name of your neighbor, not their Instagram handle, not a connection request, their actual name, and a functional, trust-based relationship that exists in the physical world, on your actual street, in your actual building. I know how that sounds to a certain kind of person watching this video, the independent type, the self-reliant type, the guy who's been quietly building his preparedness stack precisely because he doesn't want to depend on anyone else when things go sideways. That instinct is understandable, but in a real emergency, not the movie version, the documented version, it is also one of the most dangerous blind spots you can have. Here's what the data actually shows. After Hurricane Katrina, researchers from multiple universities spent years studying why certain households and certain blocks recovered faster than others. The variable that predicted recovery speed more reliably than income, more reliably than physical preparedness, more reliably than proximity to emergency services, was the strength of existing social ties within the immediate community. Blocks where neighbors knew each other, had each other's numbers, and had established even minimal trust before the storm hit. Those blocks coordinated faster, shared resources more effectively, identified vulnerable residents earlier, and returned to stability sooner. This wasn't a soft finding. It was consistent across multiple disaster studies, replicated in research on the 1995 Chicago heatwave, the 2011 Joplin tornado, and dozens of other documented events. Community is not a feel-good add-on to your preparedness plan. It is a force multiplier for everything else in it. Think about what that actually means in practical terms. Your neighbor with the chest freezer and the generator becomes a resource, if you know them. The elderly woman 2 doors down who would otherwise go unnoticed in a 72-hour outage becomes someone's responsibility, if anyone knows she's there. The guy across the hall who's a nurse, or a mechanic, or has a truck with 4-wheel drive. That skill set is invisible until there's a relationship that makes it accessible. This doesn't require organizing a neighborhood prepper group. It doesn't require revealing your supplies or your plans to anyone. It requires something much simpler and much more human. Introduce yourself, learn 2 or 3 names, exchange a phone number, know who on your block has young children or lives alone. That's the entire investment. You are not building a dependency, you are building a network. And in every documented large-scale emergency in modern American history, the people embedded in functional local networks survived better, recovered faster, and experienced less psychological trauma than the ones who went through it completely alone. The lone wolf is a compelling image. It just doesn't survive contact with reality very well. At this point in the video, you might be feeling something specific, not panic, not overwhelm, something closer to, where do I actually start? Because we've covered water, food, cooking, light, information, cash, community. And if you're the kind of person who takes this seriously, which you are, or you wouldn't still be here, your brain is probably trying to figure out how to act on all of it simultaneously. And when everything feels equally urgent, the psychological response isn't acceleration, it's paralysis. So let's fix that right now with a framework that makes the sequence obvious. 4 tiers. Each one builds on the last. Each one is a complete functional level of preparedness on its own, meaning if a real emergency hits while you're at Tier 2, you are genuinely better off than 80% of the households around you. Tier 1, 72 hours. This is the floor, the FEMA baseline. The minimum viable preparedness setup that would have made a measurable difference in virtually every domestic emergency of the last 2 decades. Water for 3 days. Food for 3 days that requires no refrigeration and minimal cooking. A flashlight and a headlamp with fresh batteries. A basic first aid kit. A battery or hand crank radio with no AA capability. A way to cook without power. $100 in small bills. This entire tier is achievable in a single weekend for under $100 total. Most households can reach Tier 1 in 48 hours if they decide to. Tier 2, 2 weeks. This is where a 72-hour disruption becomes a 2-week disruption, the kind that follows a major hurricane, a regional infrastructure failure, or a supply chain event. You're expanding your water storage and adding a purification method. Your pantry now covers 14 days of actual meals for your household. You've added a manual can opener, a basic medication kit, pain reliever, antihistamine, antidiarrheal, any prescription medications with a small buffer, and enough cash to handle a week of unexpected expenses. Tier 2 is where most families should realistically aim as their steady-state baseline. It covers the overwhelming majority of emergencies you will statistically face in your lifetime. Tier 3, 30 days, a month. At this level, you've moved beyond reacting to disruptions and into genuine household resilience. Your food supply is deep enough to absorb a prolonged supply chain event. You've invested in at least one durable water filtration system. You've thought about energy, a power bank for devices, possibly a small solar setup for essential charging. You've had a real conversation with your household about roles, communication plans, and meeting points. Tier 3 requires more investment and more planning, but it's a realistic target over 6 to 12 months of consistent incremental action. Tier 4, 90 days. This is the long game. 3 months of genuine self-sufficiency. At this level, you're thinking about seed storage, deep medical supplies, alternative energy, and community-level coordination. Most households, realistically, statistically, will never need Tier 4 for the emergencies they actually face. But for those who want it, it exists as a defined destination rather than an infinite horizon. Here's what matters most about this framework. You don't have to see Tier 4 to start Tier 1. In fact, you shouldn't. The goal this week is Tier 1, just Tier 1. One clear, achievable target with a defined finish line and a real impact on your family's resilience the moment you cross it. The map exists. Now you know where you are on it. Now I need to have an uncomfortable conversation with you. Especially if you've already started preparing, especially if you've put in real time and real money and you feel like you're ahead of the curve, because there's a trap that catches experienced preppers more often than beginners. And it's more dangerous precisely because it feels like progress while it's happening. It's called the one category trap. Here's how it works. You get interested in preparedness, you start researching, and somewhere in that research, one category clicks for you. Maybe it's food storage, and suddenly you're deep into rotation systems, caloric density calculations, and the shelf life of freeze-dried versus canned. Or maybe it's water filtration, and you own 3 different filter systems and know the micron rating of each one. Or maybe it's security, or communications, or medical. You go deep, really deep, and that depth feels like preparedness. But depth in one category is not the same as functional resilience across categories. And in a real emergency, the gap you didn't cover will matter more than the area you perfected. Let me make this concrete. 300 pounds of rice in your garage means nothing if you have 0 stored water and the municipal supply goes down. A bug-out bag, packed with military precision, is largely irrelevant during a Tuesday night flood if your pantry has 4 days of food and your car has a quarter tank of gas. 6 months of freeze-dried meals won't help if a medical emergency hits and you have no first aid supplies, no medication buffer, and no cash to cover an urgent care visit. The weak link doesn't care how strong your strongest link is. This is a systems problem. And the solution is a simple audit, not a spending spree, not a complete overhaul, just an honest assessment of where your coverage actually stands across every category. Run through this checklist right now in your head. Water. Do you have at least 12 gallons stored for a family of 4, plus a purification method? Food. Do you have at least 2 weeks of meals that require no refrigeration and minimal cooking? Cooking. Can you prepare a hot meal right now with no electricity? Light and information. Do you have a working flashlight, headlamp, and a NOAA-capable radio with fresh batteries? Medical. Do you have a basic first aid kit, a 2-week buffer of any prescription medications your household depends on, and basic OTC supplies? Financial. Do you have at least $100 in small bills at home? Communication. Does every adult in your household know the emergency plan, the meeting point, and how to reach each other if cell service is down? If you paused, even slightly, on any one of those, that's your next target. Not the category you already know well, not the gear you've been researching. The gap. Balanced coverage at a moderate level beats deep coverage in one area every single time. A household that is adequately prepared across all 7 categories will outperform a household that is expertly prepared in 2 and completely exposed in the other 5. In every realistic emergency scenario you're likely to face. Fill the gaps. Then go deeper. There's a shelf in your home right now that could fail you faster than almost anything else in a real emergency. Not your water supply, not your pantry, not your communication setup, your medicine cabinet. Or more accurately, the near total absence of a functional medicine cabinet in the average American household. Because what most people have isn't a medical supply. It's a graveyard of expired ibuprofen, a mostly empty bottle of NyQuil, and maybe a box of Band-Aids that's been there since 2019. That's not a medical resource, that's a suggestion. And in a 72-hour disruption, let alone a 2-week event, the medical and hygiene category is where households fall apart in ways they never anticipated. Not dramatically, quietly, painfully. A child's fever at 11 p.m. when the pharmacy is closed and the roads are iced over. A household member who takes a daily medication for blood pressure or thyroid function who is now 2 days from running out because the refill was due this week and nothing is open. A minor cut that becomes infected over 4 days because there was nothing in the house to clean and dress it properly. These are not exotic scenarios. They are Tuesday. Let's build this out systematically. The basic OTC layer, the supplies that should be in every household regardless of preparedness level, includes a pain reliever and fever reducer such as acetaminophen or ibuprofen, an antihistamine for allergic reactions, an antidiarrheal such as loperamide, an antacid, cold and flu medication, and an oral rehydration solution or the ingredients to make one. These items are inexpensive, have long shelf lives, and cover the overwhelming majority of common medical needs that arise during a short to medium-term disruption. Beyond OTC, a functional first aid kit needs to include more than a box of assorted bandages, gauze pads in multiple sizes, medical tape, an elastic bandage for sprains, antiseptic wipes and antiseptic solution, tweezers, a digital thermometer, nitrile gloves, at least 2 pairs, a CPR face shield, and written instructions for basic procedures, because under stress, even things you think you know can become uncertain. Now the harder conversation, prescription medications. If anyone in your household takes a daily medication for blood pressure, diabetes, thyroid, mental health, seizure prevention, asthma, anything, that medication is a critical dependency in your preparedness plan, and most households have zero buffer. They refill when the bottle runs out, sometimes a day or 2 late, and they've never thought about what happens when the pharmacy is closed for 5 days or the supply chain for that specific medication is disrupted. The conversation to have with your prescribing physician is simple. I'm trying to maintain a small emergency buffer of my medication. Is there a way to get a slightly early refill periodically to build a 2-week supply? Many doctors will accommodate this without hesitation. Some insurance plans allow early refills under emergency preparedness provisions. It is a 5-minute conversation that could matter enormously. And then hygiene, because this category disappears from store shelves faster than almost anything else in a supply disruption. Toilet paper, soap, hand sanitizer, toothpaste, feminine hygiene products if applicable, diapers if applicable. These items feel so ordinary that people never think to store them. and they are reliably the first things to vanish when shelves empty. A 1-month buffer of hygiene basics costs almost nothing when built incrementally and eliminates an entire category of stress during any disruption. Your medicine cabinet is not a luxury. In an emergency, it is infrastructure. Everything we've covered in this video has been built on a silent assumption, and that assumption might be making your entire plan less effective than it should be. The assumption is this: that the threats you face are the same as the threats facing the generic, average, fictional American that most preparedness content is written for. They aren't. Where you live is not a detail. It is the single most important variable in your preparedness plan. And most checklists, most YouTube videos, most prepper guides, including well-intentioned ones, are written for a composite person who doesn't actually exist. The average American, somewhere in the middle of the country, facing an average emergency, with average risks. You are not average. You are specific. You live somewhere specific, and that specificity should be driving every major decision in your preparedness stack. Let's make this concrete. If you live in Florida, the Gulf Coast, or the Carolinas, your primary threat is hurricane season, which runs June through November and is predictable enough to plan around with precision. Your preparedness calendar has a hard deadline every spring. Your bug-out plan needs to account for mandatory evacuation orders and the specific roads that will be gridlocked when 500,000 people try to leave simultaneously. Your water storage needs to account for the possibility of contamination after storm surge, not just supply disruption. If you live in Texas, Oklahoma, or the broader tornado corridor, your threat profile includes rapid onset severe weather that gives you minutes, not hours, to respond. Your shelter plan matters more than your bug-out plan. Knowing where the lowest interior room in your home is and having your 72-hour kit physically located near that room is a tactical decision, not a preference. If you live in California, Oregon, or Washington, wildfire is a seasonal reality, not a hypothetical. Your bug-out bag isn't an emergency item, it's a seasonal tool that should be reviewed and restocked every spring. Air quality supplies, N95 masks, air purifiers, medication for respiratory conditions, belong in your kit in a way they don't for most of the country, and your evacuation plan needs to account for the specific reality that wildfires can move faster than traffic. If you live in the upper Midwest or New England, your threat calendar is built around winter, extended ice storms, blizzards that isolate households for days, heating failures in sub-zero temperatures. Your preparedness stack needs to include heat retention, emergency blankets, sleeping bags rated for low temperatures, a backup heating source that functions without electricity. A butane stove that someone in Florida uses primarily for cooking becomes, in Minnesota in February, also a critical heat source. If you live in a floodplain, and 41 million Americans do, according to FEMA's most recent assessment, your emergency plan needs a vertical evacuation component, a waterproof document storage solution, and a clear understanding of your flood zone designation and what it means for response time. The point isn't to overwhelm you with regional specifics. The point is this: open a browser tab right now and search your county name plus hazard mitigation plan. Every county in the United States is required by FEMA to maintain a public hazard mitigation plan that documents the specific, ranked, historically documented threats to your area. It is the most useful, most ignored document in American emergency preparedness. Your plan should be built around that document, not around a generic checklist written for nobody in particular. A preparation built for your specific geography, your specific season, and your specific risk profile is worth 10 times a generic one, because when the emergency arrives, it will arrive in your zip code, not in the average one. I want to leave you with something that isn't on any checklist, because we've spent this entire video talking about water and food and cash and radios and medication and community and regional risk, and all of that matters. Every single piece of it is real and actionable and worth doing, but there's a version of preparedness that nobody talks about because it doesn't sell anything, doesn't generate affiliate revenue, and doesn't make for a dramatic thumbnail. It's the version that makes you calm, not numb, not detached, not the hollow calm of someone who has decided nothing matters. The specific earned calm of someone who has looked at the realistic threats in their life, taken proportionate action, and built a foundation that can absorb a real shock without shattering. That calm is not a personality trait. It is not something you either have or don't have. It is a direct byproduct of preparation, and it shows up in ways that have nothing to do with emergencies. It shows up when the weather forecast turns severe. And instead of a spike of anxiety, you feel a quiet steadiness. Because you already checked the batteries in the flashlight last week. It shows up when the news cycle gets loud and destabilizing. And instead of that background hum of dread, you feel something closer to clarity. Because you've already thought about what actually threatens your family and what doesn't. It shows up when your kid asks what would happen if the power went out for a long time, and instead of deflecting you say we'd be fine, here's why. And you mean it. That is not a small thing. There is a specific kind of anxiety that runs underneath modern American life, quiet, chronic, and rarely named. The anxiety of knowing that the margin is thin, that one bad month, one unexpected bill, one major weather event separates a functional household from a household in crisis. Most people manage the anxiety by not looking at it directly, by staying busy, by assuming the systems will hold. Preparation is the alternative to that strategy, not because the systems are definitely going to fail, but because knowing you can handle it if they do, actually knowing it, because you've built the capacity to handle it, removes the anxiety at the root instead of just suppressing it at the surface. The person who goes to the grocery store the night before a major storm and finds empty shelves, that person is in a state of reactive panic, competing with hundreds of other people in the same state, making rushed decisions under pressure. The person who already has what they need at home, that person is watching the storm approach from a window, with a cup of coffee, with a charged radio on the counter, knowing exactly what the next 72 hours look like. Same storm, completely different experience. That second person didn't get lucky. They didn't inherit some special trait. They made a series of small, undramatic decisions over the preceding weeks and months that compounded into something that looks, from the outside, like composure. Preparedness is not about fear. It never was. It's about building the kind of life where fear has less room to operate. Start with Tier 1 this week. One category at a time, not because the world is ending, but because you've decided that your family deserves a margin, a buffer, a foundation that holds when the ordinary machinery of life grinds and stalls. That decision, quiet, private, undramatic, is one of the most genuinely powerful things you can do, and it starts the moment this video ends. Here's the truth. Nobody in this space wants to say out loud, information without action is just entertainment. You've spent the last 30 minutes with a complete map, water, food, cooking, light, information, cash, medical, community, a 4-tier framework that tells you exactly where to start and exactly where to go next. A plan built around the threats that actually exist, not the ones that make good movies. That map is worth exactly nothing if you close this tab and go back to the same unprotected household you had when you pressed play. So here's what I need you to do, right now. Before the algorithm serves you the next video, before the moment passes, pick one thing, not 15 things, not the whole tier system. One thing from this video that you do not currently have in place, and decide, out loud, right now, that you're handling it this week. 1 gallon of water, 1 bag of rice, 1 pack of batteries, $100 in an envelope in a drawer. One thing, this week, non-negotiable. And then come down to the comments and write it down. Not for me, for you, because the research is clear. A commitment stated publicly is exponentially more likely to become a real action than one that stays inside your head. Write the one thing, make it real. If this video gave you something useful, something that reframed how you think about your family's resilience, hit the like button. It costs you nothing, and it puts this in front of the next family that needs to hear it before their version of that Friday night arrives. And if you want to keep building this, one layer at a time, no panic, no overwhelm, just a steady and honest progression toward a household that can handle what life actually throws at it, subscribe and hit the bell. That's the next step. That's how you stay in the game. The storm doesn't announce itself. The layoff doesn't schedule a meeting. The shelf doesn't warn you before it empties. But you watch this video. which means you already know something most people around you don't. Now act like it.